We are back for another episode of Count Me In. I am your host, Adam Larson, and we are now up to our 56th episode of the series. For today's discussion, we are going to hear Peter Margaritas, the accidental accountant, talk to Mitch about the value of storytelling and accounting. Peter is an engaging storyteller himself, so we will quickly jump over to hear his perspective now.
Thanks for joining us today, Peter. And as I was just kind of mentioning to you, I've done a little poking around, a little background checking here, and I came across the accidental accountant. So I'm wondering if you can kick that off and, tell us a little bit about what that means.
What that means was I didn't get into this profession until I was 30 years old. I'm Greek. I'm a Greek American. I really should be in a restaurant versus being a CPA. And I grew up in a very gregarious environment, worked in many restaurants, was very customer focused. And when I got into the accounting profession, I understood it. I loved it, but I'm not the kind that does it very well. And actually, in one of my reviews for my employer, before I even sat down, she said, "How in the heck did you ever become a CPA? A CPA can get all the way down to this detail. I can only get you about 3/4 of the way. You're an accidental accountant." And I thanked her for that. That was the nicest thing she had said. And so I've actually taken that and it's registered trademark, and it is, I'm doing business as the accidental accountant.
That's great. So as I'm going through this and I come across some of your other work here, and I saw an article that you put out there, I believe it was Accounting Today. And my next question is really about the profession in general, and how has data and technology really changed the accounting industry? And in your opinion, the article was written about whether or not GAAP is really in touch with today's economy. So how does that all piece together?
I think back to 1900s. I mean, were we really talking about data, or even in the 20s? Now we're so data driven and analytic driven. But if you sit and think about what accounting standards, when they're written and when FASB is proposing them, they're primarily for publicly held entities, especially very large publicly held entities. And they do field testing. They get these large organizations to be part of it. But a lot of companies out there use GAAP statements because it's required of them to use GAAP statements, and they're much smaller entities. I mean, the complexity of GAAP, the new revenue recognition standard, which is principles based, now rules based, is over 700 pages. The codification has over 10,000 pages. So we're trying, and it seems like we're always trying to catch up. And think about back when the derivatives and during the Enron years, and we were trying to write standards. What was it, FIN 46, FIN 46R, then there were SPEs, now they're VIEs. We were writing them, and we felt like we were about 4 or 5 years behind. When we look at today, with the SaaS applications, business software applications are being delivered on demand via the cloud. And some of the metrics that are important within these organizations as recurring revenue, churn rate, the number of subscribers, which are crucial to their business, there's no, FASB has not addressed any of these things. So I've always felt that there always has been somewhat of a gap, lack of a better term, between what we're writing and where the U.S. economy is going. And it's gotten so complex that accountants can't even describe to their clients. And when I say clients, I mean both internal and external, CFOs, in that group, to their clients, what the purpose behind it, what we're doing, how do we apply it. It's just very, very complex.
So I guess, what I'm curious about really is, aside from the complexities, aside from being behind the times, essentially, what challenges is this really causing for today's accountants, and how are these standards, really hurting the performance of today's accountant?
I'll share a story with you. Soon after that article came out, I had a partner in a firm contact me here in the Central Ohio area, and she said, "I love your article," and she shared the story with me that their firm was doing a after hours gathering, CP kind of gathering, and they invited all the community and local banks in the area to this thing. And basically, they were talking to the banks to see if they would start accepting the AICPA SME model for standards versus US GAAP because of the complexity. I'm a former banker, and I bankers don't really understand the complexity that we're dealing with. And when we're trying to, my buddy who's still in banking, when RevRec and leasing was coming out, he contacted me. He goes, "So do you guys just make standards to keep your jobs, to be relevant? Is this like full employment?" And I went, "Why not?" but the perception and reality are so different. And when we try to communicate these standards to our clients within the organization, like consolidations of VIEs, there's thousands and thousands, hundreds of pages out there on this topic. And when we're just data dumping information, all we're doing is putting them to sleep. Well, we need to learn how to, what I ask my audiences is a question like, how many of you speak a foreign language? And I'll get a few hands, French, Spanish, Japanese. I said, let me reword that question. How many of you speak the foreign language of business called accounting? And they all start laughing. And I went, it is a foreign language to the sales department, to human resources, to every part of the organization other than accounting and finance. Have you ever tried to explain anything to a sales or HR person, whomever? Can you listen to yourself? You're speaking in the foreign language of accounting. We have to become better translators of this language into plain English. And I think that's our biggest challenge, is recognizing that we speak a foreign language. Two, it's important. Why are we giving this information? So management, investors, clients can make decisions. But if they don't understand us, are they really making the right decisions? It just comes down to the way we communicate. And we're not known to be the best. We're the stereotype of being introverted, very technical, very geeky and nerdish, whatever. We have to break that stereotype. We have to bring value. We have to show value in what we do. And the only way we can do that is we can articulate the value that we bring, what we're doing for our clients, our customers, our organization.
That's a really interesting point, because even myself going through school, all these accounting classes, all the professors are telling us that accounting is the language of business, right? Everybody needs to understand accounting to understand business. But when you kind of put it that way, it's the language of business that only those within the function really understand. And it's a unique perspective to consider. But, along the same lines of what you were kind of just talking about with communication, what else do accountants really need to know today? What should they be learning today as they continue their education and polishing their skills for today's industry?
When I talk to CPAs, and especially those who are just coming out of school, I get this question, especially in those states that have the 150 hours. What should I take in that extra 30 hours, whatever? Public speaking, presentation skills, communication, effective writing, business writing. Our biggest challenge, right now, artificial intelligence, blockchain is doing the number crunching for us. The bots are able to reconcile accounts within a matter of moments. We've got what's the word I'm looking for? Artificial intelligence, Watson, who we dump a GL into Watson and spits out, well, here's your high risk areas. You need to go take a look at this. So we're not digging deep into the bowels of an organization, looking through boxes and boxes of stuff, or looking through, digital information. We're getting pointed in the right direction. So if I was coming out of college today, or when I'm asked to speak to college students, we call them soft skills, but would you agree with me on this one? We may call them soft, but they're pretty hard to master.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And they just don't come overnight. There's some folks who, I used to be that guy. quite honestly. Because I've taught accounting at the college level, and I mimicked what I saw and how to teach. And I turned into an anesthesiologist because I was putting people to sleep. So I said, there's got to be a better way to teach this. And I had the PowerPoint slides with like a billion bullets up there, a cajillion words, and just a big data dump. And the more I began to transform that into storytelling, using examples, kind of being more realistic in the approach, my my students were waking up. They became engaged in the class, and evaluations I would get. He took a boring subject and made it fun.
So what were some of the activities or different topics that you weaved into, making this a little bit more engaging? Because even communication itself, it's difficult to teach. And you said the soft skills are really hard. So what was it that really got through to the students?
I am not a PhD. So I've got a master's in accountancy and an undergrad, bachelor's administration and bachelor administration, as well as a concentration in HR. And in the classroom, and I worked for Pricewaterhouse. I've worked for Victoria's Secret Catalog. I worked for Gap Inc. Direct. I was able to take those stories that I saw, that I learned, that I was working with at the time, and be able to create an analogy, be able to create some type of metaphor, or be able to share that story to demonstrate what I was doing from the technical side. It's almost like a TED Talk, because in a TED Talk they start off with the story and then back it up with the data, story, data. But we and I say we, accountants, engineers, architects, we like to start off with the data and maybe not even get to a story. And just by doing that, we're not engaging our audience. Our brains are wired for stories, not just a massive data dump like giving a dissertation. So when I do this presentation that I wrote about at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, always start off with a story and ask the audience to close their eyes and imagine themselves giving a financial presentation, and the audience is looking at them, not their cell phone. They're not doing the conference prayer where they've got their cell phone in their hands and their heads are bowed. No, they're fixated on you having this conversation. They're almost hanging on every word. Can you imagine that happening? Ask them to open their eyes. And they go, most people shake their head no. And I said, it can. And I share another story with them. Let's get to work. And that's the key word there. It takes work. And you're changing up something completely. So you got to be able to accept some risk here and failure. Because when you first start off doing this, you will make mistakes. And that's fine because you learn from those mistakes. But it is a scary minefield per se, because I have never done this before. But a lot of folks who I speak to in the profession, they go, but I need to know how to do this, because I'm tired of the deer in the headlights look from my clients, from the sales department. I want to be valued. I want to be perceived with that value that I have, with this knowledge that I have. And I can't do it just by a massive data dump speaking a foreign language of accounting.
So not all of us are, in academia and teaching accounting students, but obviously there are ways to translate this message and apply it on our job. So, what elements of public accounting in general do you think really need to change? And what can our listeners do? What can the accounting and finance professionals here do to help advance that initiative?
So the most important thing, and I write this in my book, Taking the Amount of Numbers, the first thing that we need to do is recognize this is not about me. This is about my audience. How well do you know your audience? We come in to a meeting, we come into a presentation, we come into some proposal. We're looking at it from our perspective. We need to change that mindset. We need to flip that around. What's the audience's pain point? What's my client's pain point? And determine what that pain point is, and then provide them with the solution to that pain point. But not coming in going, here, this is what I have for you. And they don't need that. They don't want that. We tend to, I do a lot of customization in my programs. I speak the foreign language of accounting, but you know something? I don't really speak the foreign language of construction accounting or civil engineering accounting. And I did a half-day workshop for the Construction Finance Management Association, and it was about a 9-month process working with one of their instructional designers. And I had to learn, not to the depth and breadth that everybody in that room had, but I needed to learn construction accounting. I needed to learn the keywords that they use, the acronyms that they use. Same thing with civil engineering. So I could have come in and just brought my canned presentation and you know, I've been fine. Not really, because it's not relatable to those, because they look at the world differently than retail. So the key thing is think about that audience. What do they need? What can I give them? And how can I give it to them in a manner that is, have them think like Abraham Lincoln. Less is more. Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address in 272 words. The gentleman who spoke before him, a gentleman by the name of Edward Everett, former Secretary of State, spoke for 2 hours. Nobody knows Ed. We used to have to memorize the Gettysburg Address in school. Less is more. And that goes to how they design their PowerPoint slides. Less words in a picture. Less words. And you're not doing a presentation, you're having a conversation with that audience. So when we put less on a PowerPoint slide, and we're not reading from the PowerPoint slide, which we should never do, we should look at that PowerPoint slide in 2 ways. One, it's a note card. It's going to jar my memory of what I want to speak about. And 2, we want to make it easier on the audience. So we want to design it in a way that's easy on their brains. And we do that by the left hemisphere of the brain controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body. So in designing a PowerPoint slide, you want to put the picture on the left part of the slide to connect with the right hemisphere of the brain, and the text on the right side to connect with the left hemisphere of the brain. This is proven in brain science. There's a book called Brain Rules by John Medina that he's a neuroscience researcher who wrote a book that even I can understand about the brain. And there's so much work going into how the brain functions, how the brain operates in certain situations. We need to give that brain, not overwork it, because it won't understand. But when we do a data dump, and we've got 700 pages of a Rev Rec, and codifications over 10,000, that's a lot of data. We have to find a way of using less data and provide more stories for our audience to understand. So FASB's not a villain.
So that's a really good example. And, you've kind of led us all the way through this conversation. We kicked things off starting in the 1900s with accounting, and even talked a little bit about the data in the 2000s. But I usually wrap up episodes by asking our guests if they have any predictions as what the future of accounting holds. So, we've certainly shifted gears here, and we're talking a lot about storytelling. What do you envision the role of the accountant being, or how is the role going to change even more in the future of the industry?
I don't believe, I think number crunching is over. With artificial intelligence and the way technology is just rapidly changing, we have to adapt to it. So if I don't have to crunch the numbers, if I don't have to use a 10 key, if I don't really have to even use Excel, but the information is being placed in my lap, now I have to be able to, I still have to be technically sound and analyze it, but then I have to communicate it more to internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, decision makers. And I have to be able to communicate it in a manner that is persuasive in order for us to have that person take that information and use it properly.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.